We heard in the first couple of sessions about the science and the medicine of concussions. This next session is going to put a human face on what we've been talking about. Rebecca Carpenter is working on a film documentary titled My Father's Brain, which is about her father, Luke Carpenter, who was an NFL running back for 10 years before becoming a coach with the Packers. And Mr. Carpenter, after his playing career, suffered from what we would now recognize as CTE. She's going to be discussing her film with Oscar Edwards. Mr. Edwards is a business partner in the Train 'em Up Academy, which under the leadership and vision of Bobby Hosea pioneered the development of helmet-free, or what some people call heads-up tackling. He knows something about tackling himself. He played safety at UCLA in the 1970s, where under the nickname Dr. Death, he was a co-MVP and was an All-American. And I should add, before we get started, that he used his opportunity to play football at UCLA to its fullest. He earned a BA in economics and went on to get an MBA from the Anderson School of Business. So with that, I will turn it over to the panel.
Thank you, Wayne, and welcome, Rebecca. This should be exciting. This is a little exchange that we're going to have, and I'm going to ask a series of questions of Rebecca and her experience in putting together the film effort, the documentary, My Dad's Brain. But before we do that, we're going to give you a little taste of the trailer on her efforts to date. So let's start with that.
Can I just preface this?
Yeah, and she's going to preface it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Oscar. Wayne asked me to show you something really specific today, which was what it looks like in somebody. This isn't the central mission of the film, but this is what we were asked to screen today. So I just want to make sure you understand that this was the section of the film that he specifically requested that we screen for you today.
So with that introduction, we're going to talk a little bit with Rebecca.
Tackling, but no hitting.
No hitting.
Those are the rules.
Those are the rules, huh?
Tackling, but no hitting.
All right. You got to understand, I'm working with a director here. So two things to mention. One is the film that you saw. Obviously, the coloring on it is not the actual coloring. That's the projection unit here. And secondly, there are a number of other colleagues involved. I think Sarah D. is involved as a producer. Sarah here? There's Sarah. And also Eric Wyckoff, who's a co-producer and a cinematographer, who's also involved in this effort. So our first question focuses around why this story? Why you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I worked in the movie business for a long time. I'm 48 now, so I was in the movie business for about 18 years when I got a divorce. Lots of women do that. They get divorced. I had primary custody of my daughter. I wanted to do a job that would allow me to be available to take care of my daughter, so I became a teacher. And I started teaching in Title I schools in Los Angeles Unified. And I started to see some things going on that were so familiar to me in the home that I grew up in the place that my father came from, about the way that the children saw themselves and their capacities. So that was the first tip-off that there was something in the way that I had grown up that I was encountering in high-poverty schools, and it was the only common denominator, right? My father's rural, he's white, he's old, he's dead now. But these children were young, they were often of color, they were urban, but there were certain commonalities. I got my master's in teaching then because I wanted to understand more deeply what was going on, and I started to put some things together there. So that was like piece one. I had this career in the movie business. I had won awards for films that I'd made. I'd worked at a pretty high level, a couple of studios. Then I went into schools. I started to kind of go, there's something really interesting going on here. Then my father died. We were asked, we were not one of those families that sent his brain because he had cognitive issues. We were one of the families that got the phone call a couple days after his death saying, we're doing this study on brains, will you send your dad's brain? So
Who was the call from?
BU, from I don't know, it wasn't Sports Legacy Institute, it was, well, anyway, it was,
Center for the Study of Traumatic
Yeah.
Encephalopathy. It could have been Chris Nowinski or others.
it was a woman, I think, but it was the Center for the Study of, right, Center for the Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy. You'd think I know that term by now. I'm really nervous though, so hang on with me for a while. Okay. So my sister and I, and the four of us said, well, yeah, of course. So my father, he was in professional football for 40 years. 10 years as a running back, 30 years as a coach. I mean, I think he coached something like 18 Pro Bowl athletes. And so we thought, well, he's a man who would want to give his body to the sport that he loved so much. So yeah, it was a no-brainer. Ha ha ha. Sorry. Anyway, okay, sorry. Yeah, it wasn't. So anyway, long story short, we got the test results, and we were shocked, actually. Felt a little, kill the messenger, right? Felt a little duped. Or I was mad at him. This guy right here, I was really mad at him in particular because this was his fault, actually. And I was going to go on the road, and I was on a mission to prove that somebody was out to do something that had nothing to do with my family. And why did they do that press release that was in 142 newspapers saying that my father was like Mike Webster, who was, living in a van and homeless at his death? Because that was not my father. I was pissed. I was really mad. Then Sarah D., of course, this is also her fault because she said to me basically like, our children are friends, and she had also worked in the news. Rebecca, quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing you bitch about this. Either make a movie about it or shut up. And that was the origins of the film. Long answer, but that's the truth.
So that's the genesis.
That's the genesis.
That's the genesis. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
Okay. So really the love of your father.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely love. You gotta love. That was his daily mantra. You gotta love.
You gotta love.
You gotta love.
So there was an experience that your family had that you didn't know about. Tell us a little bit about
my God.
that, and how did that impact you when you actually got to the point of actually finding out what happened?
Yeah, well, so it was really funny. So I started to realize that, so my dad is like this really fun, like bigger than life guy, kind of magnificent. He would have these temper things that would go on, kind of like Candy Pyle described. And you'd sort of like see his, fun-loving self go, right? And it would happen. I'm not saying it happened, it wasn't daily or even weekly or even monthly. It was just, and you kind of go, where'd he go? Where'd that guy go? Fortunately, in my family, my mother controlled the money. My mother controlled the house payments. Okay, my mother's a little bit controlling. I'm sorry, Mom, this is going on camera, but my mother controlled everything. And so, guys, who you marry matters because my mom was great with the money. Most of these families, the women trusted their spouses to handle all the finances and all the money. And when the guy's mind started to get a little, he lost everything. And the women who had never really had jobs are suddenly going back to work as the assistant in the dental office, trying to keep a roof over their collective heads, and she's never worked. Okay, I don't feel sorry for her. Lots of women have to work and support their families. It was how it went down that was sort of like, oh, not, Anyway, so I started to realize that there were certain behaviors that my father had that were classic, actually. And then I decided I would just go start trying to find out how prevalent it was, and I hit the road. I mean, it was kind of a crazy thing to do as a single mother with a daughter at home. But with Eric and Sarah and Wayne, who's not represented on camera, I call him Q because he's just like the guy who's brilliant at everything. We hit the road, and have I answered your question yet?
You've answered the question.
Okay, thank you very much.
So from that,
Yeah.
so this was the experience, and obviously at the point that your father passed and turned over his brain to the Institute, you learned more about it and got upset and you went on this mission. What are some of the highlights in terms of just from the various perspectives? You heard all the doctors talk this morning. You heard Dr. Pantu talk about his perspective. You heard the second panel talk about the various perspectives on concussion. I mean, there's what we call, as an athlete, there's the prior, the post, the pre and the post. So there's the world of prevention. When we play, you're trying to prevent yourself from
Okay.
getting injured, and players do adapt and they adjust. And then there's the world of treatment that happens after and that you really don't want to go to, which usually would start in the training room and you get in the tank and do all that. So tell us about some of the things you learned and on this journey.
Well, I think most of us in this room, anybody who's ever had a chronic illness or catastrophic illness, you do know that pretty soon you become your own case manager, right? Because the medical system really isn't set up to actually give you a case manager who's going to actually advocate for you. Why we would expect that to happen, I'm not really sure why we would expect that to happen, because if you want anything in life, you have to work for it. So being your own advocate is something you have to work for. The first thing that I would say is, he told me right before we came up here that he was going to ask me to do like the highlights reel, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't really think about it that way, so bear with me. The first one is, the only villain here, I'm absolutely clear on this, the only enemy here is ignorance. The only enemy is ignorance. Anybody who is an obstacle to us having the information we need is ignorant themselves. The enemy is ignorance. That's number one. And that's true about a lot of things, right? I think the second thing that's really important, so my dad was a coach for 30 years. I was also a coach. I was a collegiate coach. I was an assistant coach. My coach happens to be here in the back row. I've had some great coaching here, Hilton. And, I have to say that there's this thing in education we say supplantive learning is harder than additive learning. That's a fancy way of saying letting go of what you think you know is harder than learning something new. So when we've been taught something, right, there's so many jokes I want to make right now that I won't, but when we've been taught that something is a certain way and then we're told it's a different way, we're really resistant to hearing that. That's human nature. That has nothing to do with this crisis in particular. So what I've had to do with my father, for instance, or my parenting style, or whatever, is say, okay, you know what? I didn't know. I don't have to be ashamed of myself because I didn't know. I don't have to feel bad about myself because I didn't know. There was no way I could have known. But now I do know that I didn't know. Now I have an obligation to find out what there is to be known and be an advocate for myself and those kids that I'm working with, and just let go of the shame. But also remember, we live in a world of experts. And when I say that, I mean, I don't have to be the hero of my team. I can go in and I can call in an expert. I can bring in Oscar and Bobby, for instance. If I'm wondering why the parents are more interested in teaching Junior how to kill him as opposed to like doing his math homework, I can call Keith Johnson, right? I have people I can call on to deliver expertise. That's one of the beauties of being human, is we don't actually have to have all the answers to everything. The other thing is this idea. I did ask a question that I really wanted to hear another doctor's answer, which was my understanding. I'm not a neurologist, and I when we open up to Q&A, correct me away if I'm incorrect. Is that while my brain, if I have a blow to my head, I'm not talking concussion. You knock me upside the head for whatever reason, and my brain has gotten a little bit, right? These electrical impulses are kind of disrupted. They're not talking to each other in their normal way anymore. Not that mine ever talked in a normal way to begin with, but whatever their customary way is, I can't take in new information. We call it encoding. I can't encode new information. If I can't encode the new information, I can't retrieve the new information. So if you teach me a math concept on Monday, and my brain is doing its thing, and then you give me a test on it on Thursday, chances are I'm not going to do so well on my test because I haven't encoded the information. Okay? The teacher doesn't know that I've had a blow to my head. The teacher doesn't know what they need to reteach. So I'm mostly concerned with children growing in high-stress environments. Those children growing up in stress already have a tax on their brain that is so different from a middle-class or an upper-class child that doesn't have certain other stressors going on. So to add this additional stress just seems it's something we should be aware of. And then finally with The players, there's 3 separate issues. Concussive dementia, I don't really care what you call it. I don't care if you call it early onset Alzheimer's or just cognitive impairment or CTE. For me personally, it doesn't matter what it's called or if it's got a separate diagnosis. Their brains clearly don't work. It seems to me that social workers and personal injury lawyers have known for a long time that if someone gets knocked upside the head, sometimes their personality and their ability to think changes. 80 years of medical evidence says a blow to the head can not be beneficial to somebody. It's not news. So that was kind of like, oh, this is not like news. And then I guess the last thing is there's this really brilliant, there's so many things, but these are highlights. There's this really super brilliant affective neuropsychologist who grew up in a trailer park in Seattle. He went to community college, and then he discovered that he had a mind. Somebody actually identified him as having a mind. He ended up getting his PhD in psychology, and now he runs a lab that studies what relationships do to our brains and what happens when we live in our limbic system or our amygdala versus our prefrontal cortex, and how our relationships affect that. And the most devastating thing I learned was that when your prefrontal cortex is damaged, which is where my father's brain was the most damaged, it prevents you from outsourcing your self-regulation. What that means is you can no longer benefit from your membership in a group so much because you're not able to use your prefrontal cortex in a way that allows you to extract something from that social group. Am I making any sense here? Yes, okay. Okay, that's it.
But now you're going to have a challenge.
Oh, yeah, you think?
It's not news.
Uh-huh.
It is news.
What's
Right?
news?
We agree that it is news.
What's news?
Of importance today.
What's
That
news?
has been recognition. That's what our panel has brought forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting this morning, that it is recognized the story that you're telling is more important. There's higher level of recognition around the issue of concussions, around the behavior that leads to concussions. That's what your story is telling us. That's the journey that you've been on. So you want to add to that?
I think, what's news? What's news is that information that's been around for 80 years has been connected to something that serves a vital cultural function for us, and therefore now we are interested in something that has been known for 80 years. Look, when the whole HIV/AIDS thing started, nobody gave a shit about those initial sufferers, right?
Right. We agree.
Okay. When did people start to care? When the soccer moms started to get it from blood transfusions. We cared a lot then, right?
Okay. All right. So, in looking at behavior,
Yes, sir.
behavior,
Yeah.
changing behavior,
Yeah.
in this road travel, what did you learn about experiences out there that were happening relative to changing behavior of coaches, of those involved in leadership, the responsibility, taking responsibility for our youth in football, about the culture of it?
There's so many beautiful, amazing people involved in the sport of football. The men are so extraordinarily magnificent who play this sport at a high level. They are really different. They're really different from me. I can guarantee that. Just as I'm laughing because I was thinking, Anita DeFrance and I have something in common, which is that we both wanted to make the Olympic team in the sport of rowing, but she was the only one of the two of us who actually did. Okay? She's really different from me. She's actually special in a way that I am not special. Okay? They are magnificent. And I want to say that we value them, not just because we get to watch them on Sunday. And I'm in really risky territory here when I say this, because you just remember, I am really just a soccer mom who went out with the camera to kind of figure this stuff out for myself. And I've known Wayne for a long time, so he, embroiled me in this, and Oscar, whatever. So the point is that that we subsidize this sport in junior high and high school with our tax dollars. We build stadiums, we pay football coaches, we pay for their pads, their helmets, their travel. And this sport serves a vital function for our schools and for our children and for our communities. Then we subsidize, I'm talking about us, the taxpayer. We subsidize it in college. We give them nonprofit status, so their donations are tax exempt. The merchandise they sell, tax exempt. The stadiums they build is on land that's owned by the state. It's tax exempt. There might be other things I don't know about. I didn't go that far into it. That was all I needed to know. And then we subsidize it at the professional level. We subsidize stadium complexes. A lot of these guys were approved for Social Security disability in 3 weeks, and they still couldn't get on their own former employer's disability plan. I'm going to say, based on the amount of burden that the taxpayer is bearing to support this sport, it must be pretty important to us culturally. I'm wondering if the same people who are footing the bill for it might stand up and demand some higher level thinking about the dignity with which we treat these men and their families 10 years later when we don't even remember their names anymore.
Wouldn't that also apply to our efforts in protecting our youth? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't have the statistics handy. I mean, I did 80 interviews. I have 200 hours of footage. I talked to 15 neuroscientists, neurosurgeon, neuropsychologists, history of psychology people. I spoke to 20 former professional players. I spoke to 2 Hall of Fame coaches. I mean, I really went across the country to find out as much as I could. And the chance of little Johnny ever getting paid $1 to participate in this sport is statistically nil. So what does the sport of football have to offer Johnny if he's not going to ever make a living playing it? My personal opinion is that it teaches him how to set a goal and achieve it, how to ask for help, how to work in a team, how to dig deep and learn what his limits are and surpass his limits. Do things he didn't think he could do. Leadership skills. Become the captain of the team, become the captain of the squad, become the captain of the line, become the top receiver. But I'm going to add something to that because there are some men in this room who I admire and respect who were extraordinary athletes. One of them is sitting right next to me. One of them is sitting right here, Bobby Hosea, Hilton Brown, my basketball coach and my daughter's basketball coach. There are others in here, but I don't see them so readily. What they share in common, in my personal opinion, is they developed their minds while they were developing their athletic skills. The development of their mind and their academic excellence wasn't a second place. You know what I'm saying? It was, right?
Yeah, so given that, we want to do that. That's what we want to encourage. And the safety aspect of doing that, starting at the youth level, is very important. And just to note that what Dr. Cantu said was pretty common when I was coming up in the early 70s. I mean, late 60s, most kids didn't, Pop Warner was just starting. So everybody didn't play Pop Warner football. Most folks didn't play tackle football until they went to high school.
That's right.
And so they were already 14, 15 years old. But things evolve. So with that, given that we want to keep young people safe, I want you to share what do you think this documentary will do. And in doing that, I want to frame that around because I see this as two paradigms. There's a injury prevention perspective, which Dr. Cantu and the panel both spoke to, as well as the concussion side. I want you to share in closing, what do you think this documentary film will do in the context of those two areas for the audience that gets an opportunity to see it? Share your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, the first thing is I'm not actually mad at Dr. Cantu anymore.
Good.
I was afraid he was going to think I was really mad at him, and that when I would walk off the stage, I would have to go deal with that. So I want to make sure I clear that up. What do I hope it'll do? I guess, my dad was a funny guy in that he was a lover, not a fighter. And I think that one thing that my father always had was this unbelievable awareness that he didn't get there by himself. He didn't play in 5 world championships as the sole running back on the team. Jim Brown was a better running back than he was, but Jim Brown didn't do what he did without my father in the backfield for part of his career, right? It's a dual support system. He didn't get there without the coaches that he had, the trainers that he had. He didn't get there without my mother controlling the finances. He didn't get there without my mother raising the children while he was off doing what he did. He didn't get there without the fans who paid for the tickets, who bought the merchandise. He was a person who always made it clear that nobody does anything in life alone. It's not the me show. It's the we show.
Yes.
So I think that if I can accomplish anything, it's to really understand that it's the we show, all of us, and that what Charles Payne said, he's so brilliant. I hope you guys look him up, leave here and look him up. He's a brilliant civil rights historian and educator, second in command for a while at Chicago Public Schools. Was that our relationships actually have to be the most important thing in our lives. I'm not talking about husband and wife or parent-child even. I'm talking about having respectful, dignified relationships with our peers, because that's how we're going to get stuff done. That's how we're going to accomplish things. So if we get stuck in the you're bad or you did this or this isn't true or meanwhile, kids can't take in new information. They're not learning the leadership skills they need. The coaches are afraid to admit they don't know something, so they're ashamed, so now they're covering up. And then we're just back in this sort of Gordian knot of ignorance again. And the point is, we want our children, I want to see more Oscars, more Bobbies, more Hiltons. My fiance's in the room, more Maxes. I want to see more men who played at high level in sport feeling empowered to go kick some ass in other fields. Because they're not going to make any money in the pros. They're just not. So how do we use football to help young men take possession of their minds? Well, that's a subversive idea, isn't it? Right?
Which means we have to protect those minds.
That is not my job. My job is just to tell you what's going on that I saw. So that's your job.
But it will accomplish some of that.
I hope
It will
so.
bring recognition. That is our hope. All right, we're going to open up the panel to questions.
Just remember, tackling, no hitting. Okay.
And she meant that.
Yeah.
She had mentioned some similarities between her father's situation and kids, urban setting kids. Can you clarify that?
Absolutely. Something that I observed, it's hard to describe, is a child who grows up in high poverty, high stress environment. There's not a lot of money. Parents are stretched pretty thin, maybe some domestic violence. I see that those children become ashamed of what they are. They start to see reflected in other people's eyes that they themselves are shameful, as opposed to having that sort of healthy human shame of, oh shit, I did something wrong. That's a natural, healthy shame. We need that. These kids have a very deep shame that they're intrinsically bad or wrong. And that's what I observed.
Question?
Do you have any opportunity to interview any ex-hockey players or soccer players or any ex-military folks with similar type of backgrounds of maybe repetitive head injury or something like that?
Absolutely. I interviewed ex-military. I didn't go into soccer or other sports. I mean, my daughter's a soccer player, and so I do have my daughter playing soccer in the movie, and I'm her coach. So, but I kind of went, okay, here's my brain, and my brain goes, well, let's take this to its logical end. Okay, well, let's take this to its logical end. So I did, yeah. Was there a second follow-up to that?
Yeah, my follow-up is, because I think there's two major points to your movie, and I know it'll be great, just in seeing it in the clips, because, I've worked in the NFL for 15 years, and I think one of the biggest issues that I see now with a lot of the guys who came into the league when I first started is once they're out of the league, they're out of the league. And that's not a concussion issue. That is a post-employment issue, and I think your documentary will have two very definable points. One, maybe the repetitive head injury issue, which I think is just not a football thing, and then the post-NFL time. And I think they're a little bit separated.
I want to respond to that really quickly. This is why Jim Cohn is so fascinating. Okay, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't pretend to be. I've run this by a couple of neuroscientists and neurosurgeons to see if I'm even remotely in the ballpark. And then all of you guys will jump up and scream and wave when I say something that's really egregiously wrong. Okay. A guy plays football at a really high level. I'm going to say at the professional level. And his brain gets used to producing and utilizing neurotransmitters at a different level, say, than my brain. Dopamine and opioids in particular, which are the feel good, right? In the crowd, there's the guys, there's the money. There are all kinds of things that are associated with my level now of what becomes my homeostatic set point of opioids and dopamine. I retire. Suddenly my source of these is gone. My brain is going, I need it. Okay, I'm going to gamble. I'm going to have a sex addiction. I'm going to do all kinds of, right? Okay, that's just the brain. That's not the brain on football. That's the brain on needing chemicals that it hasn't gotten. Now I've got these chronic injuries. Now I've got 2 herniated discs. This is for real. I actually have 2 herniated discs, and I've got a bunch of soft tissue damage in my back from an athletic incident. I understand chronic pain. It messes up your serotonin levels, right? So now another neurotransmitter is off, and your body is sucking up your serotonin at really high levels. It's needing to kind of calm yourself. Am I running out of time? Okay, sorry. So
You are running.
Okay, can I have 45 seconds? Okay, sorry. And so now my neurotransmitters are off. So this is just going to cause behavioral stuff. But add a blow to the head. Add cognitive difficulties, add prefrontal cortex damage, take me away from the group that's provided containment for me, mirroring an identity. In addition to all of these problems, this is a guy who's in very serious problem. Add to that, he's going to not have known how to invest his money. I interviewed an economist who said, what do these guys do when they make all this money and they lose it within 5 years? I said to him, let's go drop you in South Central and have you play by their rules for 24 hours and see if you survive. That's just stupid, okay, to expect that a guy's going to know how to invest his money just because he made it. This is ridiculous. Our expectations of these guys are absolutely ridiculous. Okay, I'm done, sorry.
One more question. We get one question. We have a question in the back.
Yeah.
Rebecca, I'm Susan. I'm president of the Brain Rehab Injury Network here in LA. And I have a daughter who has gone through basically what your dad went through. So I would like to ask you, what resources, once you found out what was going on with your dad's brain, how was your dad treated and how was he advocated for?
He was dead. We didn't find out till he was dead.
So I've got to tell you that my daughter received her injury at birth from a rushed forceps delivery that was misdiagnosed for 30 years. And it wasn't until I met a football player, an NFL player,
There you go, yeah. Right.
to understand what CTE truly is.
Sure.
And so I started this now have 6 universities that are giving me hands-on help to treat these people with dignity. And it is because of places like this today that we are not only learning all the stats, and I appreciate Dr. Ken too, and Dr. Bennett Omalu is somebody who works with our organization, but we need hands-on help for people and families, and that's what we are doing today, and it's an honor to meet you and your family.
Thank you.
With that, thank you.
Thank you.